Hey friends, tonight we begin not with the grand legends or the mighty emperors, but with something much quieter. A single breath, a barefoot step on packed earth, a rooster's cry drifting over a mist-covered field. You're about to wake. Up in ancient China, where the sun doesn't rise into a city of gold, but over rice paddies, clay-walled homes, and lives built on duty, silence, and rhythm. Before we step into this world together, take a deep breath, dim the lights, let your thoughts settle. And if you're watching from somewhere across the world, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. I always find it fascinating, this little map we build together, one sleepy voice reaching across time zones. Now maybe turn on a soft fan or curl up under a weighted blanket, and let's begin tonight's journey together. It is early, not by your clock, but by the rhythm of seasons. The time when cicadas sleep and fire pits smolder low, in the shadowed countryside of the Han Dynasty, somewhere between the Yellow River and the rice fields of Jianan, a modest peasant home begins to stir. You are not a prince or priest. You are no scholar, no general. You are simply someone, a farmer's child perhaps, or a clothmaker's apprentice. You don't write your name, few do. The written word is the art of officials, scholars, and scribes. Your language is action, obedience, and repetition. You sleep not on a bed, but on a kang, a raised clay platform warmed by coals from the night before. The heat has faded now. Now the air is cool, scented faintly with old ash and smoke-soaked. Bamboo. A paper screen filters the dawn light into soft gold. Above you, the ceiling is wooden, low, and warped. Your clothes, if you have more than one set, hang on a peg or rest folded beside your mat. Simple, homespun, and brown or dull gray. Bright colors are for weddings and nobles. Outside, the world is already awake. The rooster, arrogant and shrill, marks time as though he himself invented the morning. Oxen stir in the nearby barn. Someone coughs in a neighboring hut, a dry, familiar sound. The village lives as a single organism. One wakes, all wake. One falls sick, all prepare. One dies, and the bells toll softly across courtyards. You've walked since you could toddle. Your first task isn't to stretch or pray, it's to work. Always work. Water needs fetching. The fire needs coaxing back to life. If you're a woman, you sweep the floor and prepare rice or millet gruel. If you're a man or older boy, perhaps you head to the fields. There's no concept of weekend and little of rest, unless the emperor's birthday grants a rare festival. Day, or the lunar calendar, signals a moment of reverence. But even then, there's always something to do, always something expected of you. In your family, your father is the master, but not harshly. He too is bound, not free. It's bound by duty. By law, by the unshakable order of Confucius. Above all things, he obeys the idea of the filial household. Respect is owed to parents, then grandparents, and beyond that to ancestors, whose names are scrawled onto thin wood tablets and placed in a shrine above your door. You bow to them every morning. You do not question. You simply, not superstition. It is order. It is peace. It is survival. The village itself is small, but old. Built from packed mud and thatch, each home looks similar, like cousins rather than siblings. Doors are woven reed or plain wood. Animals wander through the narrow footpaths, knowing better than to stray far. There is one well, one market square, one elder who settles disputes. If you hear a cry, it's likely not anger, but maybe someone startled by a snake or scalded by a pot. Violence, when it happens, is swift and hushed. No police patrol these villages. Law is dispensed by the local magistrate, but it rarely comes down to your level unless something terribly wrong occurs. You don't think in terms of years. You think in harvests? The last one was good. The next one might not be. Weather is fortune. Drought is doom. Locusts are demons. And should you encounter a traveling official, someone on horseback, dressed in white and red, you lower your head. You don't speak. You let him pass. The empire is not yours to understand. It is something that simply exists, like the moon, like the stars. In this life, waking up isn't a fresh beginning. It is a continuation. The duties never truly pause. For every morning you rise, you honor a system thousands of years in the making. You are a speck in its vast body. But that speck has purpose. You live quietly, but not meaninglessly. Tend the rice that feeds a province. Your silence honors your ancestors. Your labor fulfills your duty. And when the wind rustles, the rice stalks, or the night insects hum in rhythmic chorus. Sometimes, just sometimes, you look up at the stars, the same ones the emperor claims divine right from, and wonder what it means to be so small in such a large, ancient land. But before wonder takes root, a voice calls your name. It's time to begin again. As the mist slowly lifts and the warm hum of the morning grows louder, the truth of your place in ancient China begins to settle like silt in a rice paddy. You are not a soldier. You are not a monk. You are not a courtly scribe debating Confucian. Theory beneath silk banners. You are something older, humbler, and more essential. You are a farmer. Or at least your family is. And in this world, that means you are bound to the land more tightly than any oath or scripture. Breakfast is not a feast. There are no pastries or teas poured from porcelain. There is a bowl. Its contents, gruel. Thin, watery millet porridge, perhaps flavored with a few pickled greens, if yesterday's luck lingered. The grain is coarse, cooked with well water and stirred over a clay stove. If you eat with chopsticks, they are carved from bamboo or simple. Wood, if you eat with a spoon, it's a rare luxury. And if there is meat, then someone must have married or died recently. Farming in ancient China wasn't simply a job. It was a sacred duty, imposed not by nature alone, but by the emperor himself, the son of heaven. The mandate of heaven was not just a myth. It was the moral thread stitching society together. To farm was to maintain harmony. To abandon farming was to invite chaos, flood, and famine. In other words, if you fail your land, you fail the cosmos. Your tools are basic. A wooden plow, pulled by oxen or water buffalo if your family is fortunate. A sickle, sharpened by hand. A woven basket slung across your back. Your knees ache by mid-morning. Your hands grow calloused before you're old enough to marry. Children begin helping in the fields, not out of cruelty, but necessity. The harvest waits for no one. The soil is temperamental. To dry, and the seedlings die. To wet, and the roots rot. Rain is a blessing until it isn't. And when the winds shift, bringing dark clouds from the west, you pray not to one God, but to your ancestors, your household spirits, and any force you believe might hear a peasant's plea. Because in this world, a single failed harvest means hunger not just for your family, but for your entire village. Rice is precious, but not always plentiful. In the north, millet reigns supreme. Golden grains that grow more easily in dry soil. In the south, sticky rice flourishes in muddy terraces that glisten like fish scales under the sun. These terraces carved into mountainside like stairs. To the sky are both beauty and backache. Every stone moved by hand, every layer held together by time, sweat, and ancestral knowledge. You plant according to the calendar, the lunar one. Guided by solar terms that have names like grain, rain, and white dew, each day holds meaning. Each season carries its own rhythm. Plow in spring, weed in summer, harvest in autumn, repair tools in winter. There is no month without obligation, and the taxes, they come no matter the yield. You owe the state grain, and you owe the local noble a portion too. It's measured in baskets, counted by men who do not farm themselves, but who arrive with ink-stained registers and heavy expressions. If the harvest is poor, you still pay. If it is good, you pay more. Rice can be stored. Millet lasts even longer. But your stomach doesn't understand that. It only knows what is in the pot today. Food itself is not wasted. Leftover gruel becomes tomorrow's paste for dumplings, if dumplings are even possible. Vegetables are sun-dried or pickled in large earthen jars buried outside the house. Salt is a treasure, sugar a fantasy. Tea exists, but it is rare in common homes. Most people drink boiled water with leaves from whatever shrub happens to grow nearby. Fish, if caught, is dried or salted. Meat is often pork when available, and is stewed until even the bones give up their softness, and always there is hunger. Not the kind that gnaws at your belly with open teeth, but the kind that lingers a shadow of appetite. A constant negotiation between what you want and what you can have. You are never starving, not quite, but never full either. It is a balance. That defines generations. Then there are the festivals, those brief windows when food becomes celebration. The Mid-Autumn Festival brings mooncakes, their sticky sweetness a rare delight. The Spring Festival means dumplings and long noodles, symbols of luck and longevity, but these are fleeting. The day after, it's back to fields and fire pits. Despite it all, food is not only sustenance, it is structure. It is tradition. Ancestor altars receive tiny bowls of rice before meals begin. Families eat in silence or with ritual phrases. Children serve elders first. Chopsticks are never stuck upright. In rice, that's how offerings are made to the dead. Meals are modest but full of meaning. Even the land you till may not be yours. Land ownership is complex. Some farmers rent from nobles, some from the government. Others share with family clans. Boundaries are marked by worn stones or memory. Disputes are rare but serious, and are settled by elders or scribes who keep fragile maps inked onto scrolls. A lost plot means lost food. A boundary argument can become a lifetime of hardship, and as the seasons pass, your understanding of food becomes more than physical. You learn which seeds sprout better after frost, which hills flood in spring, which insects eat roots instead. Of leaves, you know the difference between morning dew and evening damp? You begin to hear the language of the soil when it's too dry, too salty, too tired. You know when to let it rest and when to push it harder. You are not just a farmer. You are a listener, a whisper of grain. And yet, with all that effort, all that devotion, you remain invisible to most. The officials in the capital in Chang'an Luoyang, or Nanjing, they eat from bowls of lacquered wood, sip wine from bronze goblets, and recite poetry beneath silk fans. They do not know your name. Their wealth depends on your toil. Their books, their scrolls, their temples, all of it is rooted in the grain you plant. As the sun sets, your clothes are damp, your skin darkened by wind and sun. You carry the day's harvest home in baskets slung across a shoulder pole. It creaks with every step, like a slow metronome keeping time with. If you woke up this morning in ancient China and you were a man, tomorrow your life was structured, predictable, and quietly grueling. If you were a woman, it was all of that, and much less your own. In this world of dynasties and dusty philosophies, of emperors and edicts, the family is not simply a home, it is an empire unto itself, within its walls. Everyone knows their place, or pays the cost for not knowing it. Let's begin at the center, the father. He is not merely the provider. He is the law. The Confucian order that has ruled society for centuries makes this clear. The father rules the household as the emperor rules the realm. His authority is absolute. He decides where you live, what you eat, whom you marry, what trade you learn, and how long your hair is cut if at all. If he is kind, your life is stable. If he is cruel, your days pass beneath a quiet, unchanging shadow. The mother, though deeply respected, especially once she bears sons, holds a curious place in this structure. Revered in name, yet restricted in life. She runs the household overseas. The kitchen, the servants, if any, and the younger children. She is always in motion, yet never in control. Her opinions carry weight, but only as long as they align with the expectations of her husband, or later her eldest son. Even in age, a woman never commands without permission. As a child, you are taught to obey, not just out of respect, but out of belief. Disobedience isn't rude, it's dangerous, not because punishment is swift, but because it marks you as unfilial. In Confucian, China, filial piety is not just a virtue. It is the axis on which your identity spins. A disobedient son is a disgrace. A rebellious daughter, a curse. To honor your parents means to honor heaven. To shame them is to shame your ancestors and risk severing the sacred chain that connects you to them. And what of love? In a modern sense, it doesn't enter the equation, not in courtship, not in marriage. You do not choose your spouse, your family does. Matches are made not by chemistry, but by calculation, wealth, birth, location, fortune, and astrology. The family horoscope matters. Birth years and animal signs are weighed, measured, and matched. An unlucky pairing, it is believed, can bring ruin upon the household. So marriages are arranged always and often. The bride and groom meet for the first time on the wedding day itself. A daughter, from the moment she is born, begins preparing for departure. In fact, a common phrase used to describe a daughter is another family's person. Her parents raise her, feed her, clothe her, but they do not expect to keep her. By age 13, 14, or 15, she is usually married out, perhaps to a nearby village, perhaps far away. Once married, she joins her husband's household, not as an equal, but as the lowest-ranking member. It's just above the family dog. The mother-in-law watches her. The sisters-in-law test her. The husband may ignore her entirely or worse treat her as a servant. If she bears a son, her value improves. If she bears a daughter, the silence around her grows heavier. And if she remains childless, she walks a precarious path indeed. In some households, barren wives are replaced. In others, concubines are introduced to solve the problem politely. But let us not drift too quickly. Let's return to the children. Boys are precious, yes, but also pressured. They are expected to study, memorize the classics, recite analects, learn filial conduct, train in archery or music if the family is wealthy enough. They bow deeply to their elders, never speak out of turn, and are punished swiftly if they do. A bamboo rod is not considered abuse, it is discipline. If the rod is spared, it is said the child is spoiled. Girls, meanwhile, are trained in different arts, sewing, embroidery, cooking, cleaning, modesty, and silence. Their names are recorded but not celebrated. When a boy is born, firecrackers are lit. When a girl is born, the house is quiet. A girl may be clever, but cleverness is dangerous. Better to be gentle, better to be quiet, better to listen and obey, and one day be a good daughter-in-law there. Is an ancient phrase. A woman is obedient 3 times, first to her father, then to her husband, and finally to her son. Even in old age, she is rarely autonomous. A widow may gain some freedom, but only within bounds. To remarry is often frowned upon. Widowhood, in some cases, becomes a badge of virtue. There are even stories elevated as examples of widows who lived in hardship for decades, refusing all suitors, never again cutting their hair, never again wearing red. But not all families are cruel, and not all marriage is cold. Love may grow softly, like moss on stone. A husband may come to cherish his wife. A father may adore his children. Laughter may echo through clay courtyards. These moments, though quiet, are real, but they are not expected. They are not the norm. They are the accidents of kindness, the surprises of gentleness, not the promises of the system. And what of those who rebel, who refuse to marry, or who run from obligation? They become cautionary tales. Girls who flee become pariahs, stories to frighten the younger daughters. Boys who speak against their fathers are cursed in the family records. Sometimes they are cast out. Sometimes worse, honor is the lifeblood of a household. Shame is its poison, so life continues. Birth, obedience, marriage, obedience, death, obedience still. Even in mourning there are rituals. Filial sons must weep loudly, wear coarse hemp clothes, and eat no meat for weeks or months depending on the rank of the deceased. A son may not marry during the mourning period. A daughter may be called back to kneel and wail at the family shrine. Tears are expected. Silence is a scandal. Yet within this rigid system, families persist. Children play, sisters whisper, mothers hum lullabies. Fathers carve toys from leftover wood. There is affection, but it is quiet. There is pride, but it is hidden. There is resilience, tucked away beneath rules, beneath hierarchy. Yes. Beneath all the ways people learn to survive a life not entirely their own. And so, as the evening lanterns are lit, casting long shadows on the courtyard walls, you realize something. In ancient China, the family is not a refuge from the world. It is the world. And whether you were born into its highest seat or its lowest corner, you carry its weight, its structure, and its silence. When the moon hung low every day of your life, rooftops, and the wind rustled through bamboo groves, illness could feel like more than just a bodily burden. It was a message, a whisper from the spirit realm, a misalignment in the universe, a punishment perhaps, or a warning. In ancient China, the sick were not only treated with herbs and hands, they were read like fragile scrolls, deciphered by healers who saw illness not merely as a physical disruption, but a cosmic one. If you fell ill, a fever, a pain in the chest, or strange dreams, the first step wasn't to run for a hospital. There were no hospitals, not in the modern sense. Instead, your family might summon a physician if they could afford it, or more likely, a local herbalist, a bone setter, or a wandering Taoist healer. He might arrive with a worn satchel, filled with bundles of fragrant leaves, dried insects, and tiny stones, but he would not reach for a remedy first. No, he would reach for your wrist. Pulse taking was sacred. Not a quick tap at the wrist like we do today, but a slow, meditative ritual. 3 fingers on the radial artery, each resting over a different pulse point. In Chinese medicine, there are not 1 or 2 pulses, but 28 types. Each tells a story: the slippery, the wiry, the faint, the thready, the full. Each corresponds not just to organs, but to elements, emotions, and seasons. Your pulse might suggest that your liver is hot, or that your spleen is damp, or that your heart, poor thing, is overacting due to fire rising from the gallbladder. Confused? That's because Chinese medicine was never about anatomy in the Western sense. There were no dissections, no models of muscles and tendons. Instead, the body was seen as a flowing network of energy, ki circulating through channels called meridians. These meridians crisscrossed the body like invisible rivers. When they flowed freely, you were healthy. When they were blocked, stagnant, or flooded, you were not. The goal of medicine was to restore harmony. Harmony between organs. Harmony between the body and the environment. Harmony between the seen and unseen. Sometimes this meant dietary changes. Avoid cold foods. Drink boiled water with ginger. Chew dried tangerine peel. Other times it meant herbs bitter, pungent, earthy, ground, and boiled into thick black tea. A remedy might include things like licorice root, angelica, peony bark, or even powdered deer antler. More alarming remedies included bear bile, crushed pearls, or scorpion shells. The logic? Everything in nature held energy. The key was knowing how to harness it. Cupping was another common therapy. Heated bamboo cups, placed quickly on the back, would create suction, leaving dark purple rings. This was said to draw out bad winds. Moxibustion was another. This involved burning dried mugwort near acupuncture points, not to hurt, but to warm and stimulate the ki. And of course, acupuncture. Thin metal needles, inserted along those mysterious meridians, used to adjust the body's flow like tuning a zither. Did it hurt? Sometimes. But pain was secondary to purpose, and yet for all this knowledge, medicine was never purely scientific. It was deeply spiritual. A physician might consult the I Ching, the Book of Changes, to understand the root of an illness. A mother might burn paper charms near her sick child's bed. A Taoist monk could be summoned to expel ghosts from the body, believed to cause tremors, seizures, or madness. Sometimes illness wasn't in your lungs or liver at all. It was in your karma. Night terrors. Perhaps your soul had wandered too. Far in sleep, a persistent cough. Maybe your ancestor was displeased. It was not uncommon to see families light incense and kneel before family shrines, begging the spirits for mercy. Offerings of rice, joss paper, or roasted duck might be left out. The line between sickness and sin was blurry, and in many villages the explanation that the spirit is disturbed was more comforting than the body is failing. Women's health had its own taboos and treatments. Menstruation was poorly understood, but strictly monitored. Herbal tonics were brewed to help fertility, and young wives were often given soups to nourish the womb. Midwives experienced women, not formally trained, handled births. Labor was endured at home, often with no pain relief beyond tightly gripped cloth and whispered prayers. If complications arose, survival was a gamble. Babies who didn't cry were often feared to be cursed. Stillbirths were sometimes buried in silence, without name or ceremony. Mental illness was almost never called such. A man who wandered at night or spoke to invisible beings might be said to suffer from excessive heat or yin deficiency. Treatments could include cold baths, isolation, ritual cleansing, or terrifyingly exorcisms. In wealthier homes, a Confucian scholar might be consulted to restore moral order through structured routine and virtue. And what of death? When medicine failed, death was not always feared, but it was carefully managed. The dying were surrounded by family. Candles burned. Favorite possessions were placed nearby to carry into the next life. Coins, rice, and symbolic papers were prepared. The body was washed and dressed, often in white, but most important was ensuring the soul's passage. Taoist priests might chant. Buddhist monks might recite sutras. The departed was never alone. Even in silence, the ancestors waited. So if you became ill in ancient China, you didn't just seek healing, you stepped into a vast network of belief, custom, theory, and hope. You became a vessel, not only of fluids and breath, but of fate and family, heaven and earth. Your health was a story, not a symptom. And the doctor, or the healer, or the monk, was less your savior than your translator. Even in pain, you were part of the order. Even in weakness, you were woven into the fabric of balance. There were no quick fixes, only careful listening. The rustle of leaves, the thrum of pulse, the flicker of flame in a darkened room. Medicine, in ancient China, was not a science of speed, but of silence. And sometimes, in the stillness of it all, healing began. As the early morning fog clings to the mountains of the northern frontier, a trumpet echoes through the chilled air, faint and somber, like a warning whispered through stone. You are a conscript now, a humble farmer no longer. Drafted under Imperial command. Your life has shifted from rice fields to the ramparts of an empire that stretches beyond your comprehension. The year is unknown to you, for calendars or for scholars and scribes. All you know is duty. All you are told is to obey. The wall stands before you, not yet the Great Wall of China as we call it today, but sections of it, fragmented, built and rebuilt by dynasties rising and falling like the tide. Earth-packed fortresses, brick-faced, barriers, watchtowers like blinking eyes scattered across the mountains. Your section is in the state of Zhao during the Warring States period, or perhaps under Han rule centuries later. Time blurs when every sunrise brings the same routine. Drill, dig, march, repeat. This wall is not just stone, it's a statement, a testament to fear, a message to the nomads beyond the northern deserts. Stay out. But no one tells you that. You only know the weight of a shovel, the dryness of your mouth, the ache in your back from carrying bricks, day after day, year after year. The Imperial edict had arrived in your village with the stamp of red wax and black lacquer. Resistance was treason. And so you left your home, your family, your ancestors' graves. You swore fealty to the emperor, and now you build what you do not question. Soldiers in this part of China are not glorified heroes. You do not march in polished armor beneath banners flapping triumphantly in the wind. You sleep in straw hovels next to lice-ridden comrades. You drink from communal pots and eat gruel so bland it tastes like dust. Your uniform is a tunic of coarse hemp, your weapon a spear taller than you are. Its metal tip dulled from repetition, not war. And yet you are not alone. Thousands of others from every corner of the empire toil beside you, exiled criminals, indentured farmers, debtors working off punishment, captured enemy tribes forced into servitude, all absorbed into the machinery of defense. The labor is constant. In summer, You sweat so profusely your clothes rot from the salt. In winter, the cold seeps into your bones like ink into rice paper, and still, the wall must grow. If it collapses, it is your fault. If it cracks, you are. Beaten if you die, you are buried beneath it. You learn quickly not to ask questions. Why does the emperor need this wall? Why are we guarding against people we have never seen? Why do the generals live in tents, lined with silk, while your hands bleed raw? You silence these thoughts. They serve no purpose. You repeat the mantras drilled into you during morning formations. The Empire protects, the Empire provides, the Empire knows. Whether true or not, they become the rhythm of your breath. Occasionally, a real danger arrives. Whispers of bandits, horse spotted far on the steppe, a flaming arrow crashing into the night. When the alarm sounds, your training takes over. Line up, shield up, spear ready, face the wind, and wait. But mostly, nothing happens. The wall is both a deterrent and a prison, its presence alone doing the work of 10,000 soldiers. Still, fear lingers. The fear that you are a pawn, the fear that the enemy is not out there, but among your own ranks. Discipline is everything. Disobedience is met with swift punishment. Lashings for falling asleep at watch. Starvation for losing. Gear. Execution for desertion. One day a man from your squad collapses from exhaustion. He is not dead, but no one helps him. To stop is to show weakness. You step over him. You march on. Later you hear he was buried in the foundation of a new tower, his name scratched on a broken tile and left unmarked. You do not ask why. Yet even in this grueling monotony, you find moments of strange peace. At night, sitting on the parapet under stars older than memory, you hum the lullabies of your youth. Remember the warmth of your mother's rice cakes? The scent of incense burning during spring festivals. A comrade beside you passes you a carved wooden charm from his village, a dragon curled around a grain stalk. He tells you it brings protection. You nod. You need all the protection you can get. Sometimes, officers bring news from the court. A new emperor, a marriage alliance, a rebellion in the south. None of it feels real. The capital is a world away. You are not a man of politics. You are a name on a list, a number in the logbook, shadow in the empire's long reach. The wall is your master now. You know its stones better than your own children's faces. You know which ones crack in frost, which towers echo in the wind. You know where ghosts linger? Yes, ghosts. Men who died during construction, spirits of mothers who cried themselves to sleep. Phantom armies of forgotten dynasties. Sometimes in the quietest hours, you think you hear voices carried in the wind, not in Mandarin, but in ancient tongues lost to time. You do not fear them. You envy them. Occasionally, a high-ranking general arrives, inspecting the troops. His armor shines, his boots are clean, speaks of loyalty, of honor, of destiny. You stand at attention, you do not blink. When he leaves, nothing changes. The wall still grows. The soup still burns your tongue. The lice still bite your skin, and yet the weight of duty does something strange. It erases your past. Your former life fades like ink left in the rain. You are no longer a farmer, no longer a son, no longer a name. You are Imperial. You are wall. You are endurance made flesh. In time, the wall is finished, not the whole thing, but your section. A new batch of conscripts arrives to replace you. You are given a small coin, certificate with red brushstrokes, declaring you loyal and laborious. You are told you may return home. When you arrive at your village, years have passed. Your father is dead. Your son does not recognize you. Your wife has grown old in your absence. The fields are unfamiliar, and so you wander. Perhaps to another post, perhaps to the mountains, perhaps into myth. Out beyond the lush river valleys and walled cities of central China, far from the familiar cadence of court officials and Confucian rites, lies a world more obscure, the borderlands. These are the distant reaches of empire, where the soil is coarser, the tongues are stranger, and the rules of civilization begin to blur. If the forbidden city was the heart of the dragon, these ragged edges were its claws, reaching, grasping. scraping against the unfamiliar. You are not a noble, nor a peasant here. You are something in between. A frontier settler, translator, a soldier stationed far from the capital, perhaps even a foreign trader given rare permission to remain. You wake each morning to the sound of multiple dialects mingling in the misty air. Chinese, yes, but also Tibetan, Uyghur, Burmese, Mongol, and languages even older. Passed orally from parent to child in mountain villages to remote for maps. Life on the frontier is not defined by comfort. It is defined by uncertainty. Borders shift like dunes in the wind. Depending on who holds power in the capital or which warlord controls the trade routes this month, one day, the banners of the Han flutter over the town square. The next, emissaries from a local chieftain arrive to demand taxes in copper and grain. The Imperial reach is long, but not endless. Out here, survival depends more on negotiation than law. The people around you are a tapestry of cultures. Traders with bronze armbands and yaks laden with salt. Pilgrims carrying prayer flags. Fishermen whose eyes do not match your own. Local women who speak 3 languages, but read none. Children who recite poetry in one tongue and swear in another. This diversity is not celebrated, it is tolerated. The Empire wishes to assimilate, not to learn. Everything foreign is exoticized, but also suspect. The government sends officials now and then to remind everyone who is in charge. They arrive with scrolls, stamped decrees, and lists of forbidden words. No heretical teachings, no barbarian customs. No unlicensed gatherings. These notices are posted on walls. Some read them, others pretend to. A local elder tears one down after a few days, claiming it offends the ancestors. No one reports him. In your town, there is a shrine, not to Buddha or Confucius, but to something older, carved stone with no inscriptions. Locals leave offerings of dried fruit, feathers, and smoothed river stones. When you ask about it, they smile politely and change the subject. You learn not to press. Imperial officials are wary of the border. They see it as a place where loyalty frays. Spies are sent to monitor the people, but few return with clear answers. Too many accents, too many names, too much night without enough lanterns, and so suspicion grows. A merchant is jailed for using a script no one can translate. A monk is executed for chanting a mantra considered subversive. A foreign traveler disappears and no one investigates. This is not injustice. This is order, or so the Empire believes. You keep a journal in secret. It is not allowed, but you need somewhere to place your questions. Why do the officials fear words they don't understand? Why are border people both pitied and taxed? Why is silence safer than truth? One day a traveling scholar arrives. He claims to be mapping the Empire's outer edges for the Ministry of Rights. He eats quietly, listens more than he speaks, and disappears before sunrise. A week later, you hear whispers that he was not a scholar, but a dissident. His scrolls were poems, not surveys. He wrote of wind and dust and the weight of exile. His words were unpatriotic, his punishment unknown. In times of tension, the government restricts movement. Traders are confined to designated quarters. Foreigners must wear colored sashes. Curfews are imposed. Local festivals are banned. You remember one autumn, when the moon was full and the fields were golden, an entire celebration was shut down. By a single guard waving a red-inked writ, the people complied. The drums were silent. But the lanterns still floated downriver, carried by the current like forgotten prayers. Despite this, border people adapt. They always have. A mother teaches her children to speak one way in the market, another at home. A scribe writes 2 versions of each record, one for the officials, one for the ancestors. A medicine man chants in 3 dialects and claims all cures come from the same mountain spirit. Even your own thoughts begin to split. One set for public conversation, another for late-night whispers, and then there's the wall. Not the famous Great Wall of stone and legend, but the mental wall, invisible yet ever-present. The sense that you are not quite inside the Empire, yet not fully outside it either, citizen in theory, an outsider in practice. You are watched, measured, filed away in records no one reads. And yet you persist in your town's tea house. Someone has painted over a wooden beam the characters for harmony through distance. It is not an official saying, and no one admits to writing it, but no one erases it either. It captures the mood perfectly. Harmony, yes, but only if you stay quiet, only if you forget certain names, only if you pretend not to notice the contradictions. 1. Winter, a caravan from beyond the mountains brings silk dyed in colors no one has seen before. The officials confiscate it, declaring it culturally corrosive. The fabric is burned in the square. Children cry. Elders nod solemnly. The next month, the same shade appears in a local tapestry, woven from memory. It is sold quietly, too. A merchant bound for the capital? The empire may fear color, but memory does not. By night, you dream in 2 languages. In one, you bow low, speak in formal tones, and recite the Analects. In the other, you sing lullabies that no textbook contains. You are a border person now, and that means carrying 2 histories, 2 futures, and countless secrets. And when the wind blows, carrying voices from the mountains or the desert, you do not flinch. You listen, out here on the edge. Of the empire, forbidden words are sometimes the only ones worth remembering. If ancient China had a face, it would not be a warrior's grimace or a scholar's knowing smile. It would be the still, unreadable mask of the bureaucrat. Not the emperor himself, cloaked in silk and surrounded by eunuchs, but the nameless clerk bent over bamboo slips by candlelight. The ink-stained hand that recorded taxes, marriages, crop failures, and rumors. The empire, for all its grandeur, did not run on charisma or conquest. It ran on paperwork. Tonight, you are not a hero or a rebel. You are a scribe, a minor functionary in the great administrative machine. You rise before dawn not to train for war, but to measure grain. Your brush is your sword. Your enemy is disorder, and your orders come from very far away, sealed in red wax, carried by dusty couriers who never smile. The emperor's will is absolute, but it is also abstract. It cannot rule every field or market personally, so he sends his will down through layers, officials, governors, magistrates, and clerks. Each one interprets, edits, and enforces, and each layer adds weight. By the time it reaches your desk, the command may be simple: increase the rice quota, but the consequences of misunderstanding it are anything but. You live in fear of errors, a missing character, a smudge of ink, a miscounted census figure. These are not small mistakes, they are crimes, because mistakes imply negligence, and negligence implies disloyalty. You do not explain yourself. You confess. Your records are checked and rechecked by men above you, and by spies who are not supposed to exist. You are surrounded by silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, watching kind. Colleagues do not speak freely. Walls are thin, and secrets echo. A joke about the emperor could cost your life. A poem interpreted the wrong way could brand you a traitor. Even your dreams feel censored, like your mind knows it is not safe to wander. Censorship is not a policy. It is a reflex. The empire fears chaos more than cruelty, so it watches, it edits, it erases. The stories that question tradition are rewritten. Books are banned for mentioning floods too often, as it might suggest the mandate of heaven is weakening. Histories are rewritten with each new dynasty, like a scroll that is always being painted over. Truth is not constant. It is updated. You know of the censorate, a bureau so powerful it can inspect ministers and governors without warning. Its agents dress like ordinary men, but speak with terrifying authority. They appear in towns unannounced, read your reports in silence, and ask questions with no visible emotion. They do not smile when they leave. If they return, someone will vanish. In this environment, loyalty is not a virtue. It is a defense mechanism. People memorize the Imperial Almanac the way others memorize prayer books. They quote the Analects not because they love Confucius, but because it is safe. Everyone is fluent in euphemism. You learn to say the wind is shifting instead of the emperor is sick. You learn to say, He is meditating instead of he has been executed. Above all looms the emperor, a figure so distant that most of his subjects will never hear his voice. And yet his presence is everywhere. His portraits, his edicts, his temple offerings, his taboos. You cannot write his name without special permission, cannot refer to him directly in public. You call him the Son of Heaven, but you do not look toward the sky when you say it. His shadow stretches across your life. He decides when the year begins, what crops are promoted, which scholars are honored, which colors are forbidden in clothing. Even your calendar is his creation, not a record of time, but a proclamation of order. He is your ruler, your God figure, your dread. And you know he is mortal, but it would be heresy to say so aloud. Every document you touch is sacred. A tax scroll, a criminal confession, a border permit, all are sealed with stamps that bear imperial authority. To alter one is forgery. To misplace one is treason. To question one is madness. Yet for all this, you find strange comfort in routine. You wake, sweep the floor, light the incense, and copy the day's assignments. You measure rice, ink, and silence in equal parts. You burn old reports in neat piles. You bow often and speak little. You survive once, a scholar in your bureau. Whispered to you about a book he'd read, a banned volume of ancient Taoist philosophy that suggested true order cannot be forced, only discovered. He said it changed his view of the world. A week later, he was transferred to the provinces. No one has heard from him since. Sometimes you wonder what would happen if you simply left, walked beyond the walls, into the hills, and became a fisherman or a monk. But then you remember the registry. Your name is recorded. Your family lives under your name. If you vanish, they answer for you. In the empire, you do not belong to yourself. Your handwriting has become identical to your supervisor's. Your thoughts are not your own, but echoes of regulations. You feel less like a person and more like a conduit, the emperor's will flowing through your fingers. And yet this is the point. Harmony through hierarchy. Peace through paperwork. One day, a new edict arrives, an imperial order to simplify. Regional dialects for better standardization. It is not debated. It is implemented. The local children begin learning a new pronunciation. Old songs fade from memory. Scrolls are replaced. It feels like the wind has changed, but the sky remains the same. You sit at your desk, brush in hand, copying the edict onto thin sheets of bamboo. You do not cry. You do not sigh. You simply write. Because in ancient China, obedience is survival. And in the emperor's shadow, nothing grows, but everything is recorded. In the grand sweep of dynasties and conquests, of emperors and edicts, the stories of women in ancient China are barely whispered. They live in the margins of official history, tucked between brushstrokes of bamboo scrolls and faded temple records. Their lives are not marked by dates or declarations, but by repetition, weaving, cooking, silence. And yet they form the heartbeat of the empire, beating softly beneath the noise of politics and war. If you were a woman born into ancient China, your life began with a quiet expectation. From your first breath, you were told who you would become, not in your own name, but in relation to others. You were someone's daughter, later, someone's wife, eventually someone's mother. Worth was measured not in what you did, but in how well you disappeared into the roles assigned to you. Your feet were small, and they were meant to stay that way. If you lived in the Song dynasty, or after, the practice of foot binding loomed like a shadow over your early years. Mothers did not question it. It was tradition. A girl with unbound feet could not marry well. So your arches were broken before you understood what beauty meant. White cloth twisted bone into lotus shapes. Each step became a silent performance of pain, a performance you were expected to smile through. Marriage was not a choice. It was a contract. Your family arranged it, often before you understood what marriage was. Dowries were exchanged, dates were selected by astrologers, and when the day came, you were draped in red and sent away in a curtained sedan chair. You bowed to a man you barely knew, and then to his parents. Your duty was not to love, but to obey. You lived with his family, not yours. You woke before dawn to sweep, cook, spin, and serve. You addressed your husband's parents as masters. You ate last. You spoke less. And when you were praised, it was usually for your silence. Confucian values shaped every corner of your world. The three obediences to father, husband, and son were carved into your education. If you learned to read, it was only from moral instruction books written for women. They taught you to be chaste, humble, and industrious. They warned you against gossip, laughter, ambition. They told you that virtue was invisibility, but invisibility does not mean inactivity. Women worked tirelessly, in fields, in kitchens, behind looms. In poor families, you tilled soil alongside men, bent under the same sun, calloused hands dragging baskets of millet. In merchant families, you kept household accounts, managed servants, and arranged the marriages of your children. In noble households, you embroidered for hours, perfecting stitches no one would see outside your chamber. Your world was interior. Gardens, courtyards, kitchens. You were the guardian of the ancestral altar, the keeper of family rituals, the weaver of generations. You knew the herbs to treat fevers, the stories to calm a crying child, the phases of the moon for planting. But your knowledge was unrecorded. It passed in whispers from mother to daughter, each generation threading its voice through the silence. Some women became more than what the world allowed. A few entered Buddhist or Taoist monasteries, seeking a different kind of life, one with study, solitude, and spiritual purpose. Nuns copied sutras, grew medicinal herbs, and sometimes escaped the grip of marriage. Yet even in the cloister, they were expected to be modest, obedient, and quiet, in rare cases. Women gained political power. Empresses, concubines, regents. Wu Zixin rose from concubinage to become the only female emperor in Chinese history. Her reign was strong, ambitious, controversial. And yet history remembers her through a distorted lens, accused of cruelty, vilified for doing what male rulers had always done without rebuke. Powerful women were never just rulers. They were threats. Most women were not remembered at all. Their names were not carved on monuments. Their deeds were not written in official histories. But their absence speaks volumes. Because behind every soldier was a mother who raised him. Behind every scholar was a wife who kept the home running. Behind every emperor was a nursemaid, a wet nurse, a tutor, a forgotten face, and a painted scroll. Sometimes, late at night, you would sit in the courtyard under a paper lantern and stitch quietly. The children were asleep, the household finally still. And in the hush of that moment, you could almost hear your own thoughts. You remembered your mother's voice, your grandmother's. Hands, the stories they told of peach blossoms and fox spirits. You remembered who you were before titles, before rules. You did not speak these memories, but you kept them, like pressed flowers in a book, hidden between the lines. Even joy had to be quiet. A successful harvest. A child's first words. Rare day without shouting. You learned to celebrate with your eyes, not your voice. And when sorrow came, the death of a child, the rage of a husband, the ache of loneliness, you cried into your sleeve. You told no one, 'cause suffering was expected, and expected things are not discussed. Yet through all this, women endured. They stitched, planted, sang lullabies, boiled rice, and lit incense. They endured emperors and famines, wars and rituals. They carried the weight of tradition on narrow, bound feet and still found a way to dance. So tonight, remember them. The silent majority of ancient China, the wives who waited, the mothers who mended, the daughters who listened. They were not warriors or poets or ministers, but they were the threads that held the tapestry together. And without them, the empire would have unraveled centuries ago. Justice in ancient China was never blind. It had many eyes watchful, suspicious, sometimes cruel, and always trained on the people. It was a justice rooted not in fairness, but in control. It did not aim to rehabilitate, but to extract obedience, confession, and fear. And whether you were a petty thief or a government official, if you found yourself accused, it was rarely a matter of evidence. It was about surviving what came next. Imagine this. you are summoned, not to a court, but to a Yamanan official's administrative office, the nerve center of district governance. The magistrate, a man appointed by the imperial government, holds absolute authority. He is not just judge, but prosecutor, investigator, and enforcer. His robe is embroidered, his expression unreadable, and his word carries the weight of imperial law. Before him, you do not speak unless asked. You bow, kneel, and await your fate. The law code was comprehensive, pages upon pages of exacting rules that governed everything from land disputes to marriage fraud, theft, and murder. The most famous of these, the Temp Code, later refined by the Ming and Qing dynasties, offered detailed punishments for crimes major and minor. But it also granted magistrates sweeping discretion, and that discretion often bled into cruelty. Torture was not the shameful exception, it was the sanctioned method of investigation. Confession was seen as the purest evidence, and so extracting a confession became the goal. Even if the confession was forced, even if the body broke in the process, if you were brought in for questioning, you might first be asked politely. Might even deny the crime. The magistrate had tools, literal ones. Implements of pressure and pain were laid out in full view. Bamboo rods, wooden slats, finger crushers. The bastinado, a favorite method, involved beating the soles of your feet until the skin split and the bones bruised. It was considered effective and not life-threatening. If you still did not confess, you might meet the kang, a heavy wooden collar locked around your neck, forcing your head down and your back to hunch. It was both a punishment and a spectacle, used to parade the accused through town. Sometimes food was denied. Sometimes you were beaten as you wore it. Days could pass in this humiliation. For more severe crimes, the torture intensified. There were ankle crushers and thigh presses. Some punishments were designed to maim without killing, because the confession still had to be spoken. A guilty man missing fingers was better than a silent one. But if you confessed too quickly, it was suspicious. Too slowly, and it was frustrating. The balance was impossible. Women were not spared. They were often accused of adultery, witchcraft, or family disobedience. In many cases, their trials were held behind closed doors, but that did not mean mercy. Bamboo rods left the same bruises on women's bodies.
Ow.
They too were forced to kneel for hours, to carry the kang, to endure beatings. In extreme cases, they were tossed into water tanks to test their innocence. Float, and you were guilty of spiritual impurity. Sink, and you were innocent, though perhaps drowned. There were prisons, but not in the modern sense. Chinese jails were temporary holding pens, not places for long sentences. The idea was to punish swiftly, then release, or execute. Jails were dark, damp, and disease-ridden. You slept on cold stone floors, shackled with rats as your only companions. Food was scarce, clean water scarcer. Bribing the jailer might earn you a blanket, but no bribe could hide the smell. Execution was public, deliberately so. The crowd gathered at dawn. The condemned knelt on the ground, hands tied, hair unkempt, robes dirty from days of confinement. Sometimes they were paraded through the streets beforehand, as the town watched. The crime was announced, the sentence read. Then the sword fell. Beheadings were common, but not the only method. For especially heinous crimes, treason, parricide. Corruption, there was the dreaded linky, the death by 1,000 cuts. The condemned was tied to a post, and the executioner began slicing, methodically starting with the flesh, then the limbs. It was brutal, theatrical, and meant to send a message: defy the state. And the state will make you an example. Even after death, punishment could continue. Officials who fell from grace might have their tombs desecrated, their ancestors stripped of titles, their families banned from office for generations. In China, shame was a punishment that echoed through bloodlines. The legal system prized order, harmony, submission. Mercy was not its goal. Deterrence was. And so, collective punishment was common. If you stole a loaf of bread, your neighbors might be questioned. If you ran from conscription, your family might lose their land. If you spoke out against an official, your entire village might be fined. Guilt was contagious. Silence was safer, but justice was not only administered by officials. There were village elders, local tribunals, temple courts. These offered some recourse, especially for civil disputes, land boundaries, broken betrothals, bride prices unpaid. But even here, power favored the powerful. Wealth could buy outcomes. Poor farmers and widows often found little comfort in appeals. Corruption bled through every layer. Magistrates earned meager salaries, but were expected to host banquets, offer bribes upward, and maintain their status. Many took gifts from petitioners. A bottle of wine, a bolt of silk, few coins left beneath the scroll. Everyone knew, few protested. It was the price of doing business with the law. If you were lucky, your name was cleared. The magistrate ruled in your favor. You returned to your village bruised but free. But the stain remained, people whispered. The Kang left marks not just on your neck, but on your reputation. And in a society built on hierarchy and harmony, reputation was everything. So you kept your head down, you paid your taxes, you bowed to officials. You taught your children to obey, not question. Passed on stories not just of emperors and warriors, but of the neighbor who once spoke too freely and vanished. You prayed at the temple, lit incense, and hoped the gods were more forgiving than the courts. Tonight, as you drift into sleep, imagine the echo of wooden sandals on stone, the rustle of silk robes in a silent yamen, the creak of bamboo rods, stored just out of sight. This was just as not blind, but all-seeing, not balanced, but brutal. And in ancient China, as our quiet journey through ancient China draws to a close, let us now settle into the long, slow twilight of empires. The grandeur has faded. The court musicians have gone silent. The walls of the forbidden city now echo with uncertainty. Firm, so absolute in their youth, have begun to crack. And through those cracks seeps confusion, rebellion, famine, and sorrow. The final segment of our story is not about glory. It's about endings and the weight they leave behind. The cycle of dynasties in China was never static. From the earliest days of the Shang and the Zhou to the final breaths of the Qing, the mandate of heaven, the divine approval granted to righteous emperors, guided the rhythm of power. But heaven's favor was conditional. When a dynasty grew, corrupt when famines came, when uprisings stirred, it was said that heaven had withdrawn its mandate. Earthquakes were omens, eclipses, warnings, and when warlords rose, the end was usually already written. Imagine waking up in the countryside. During the dying years of the Han Dynasty, the roads are quiet not with peace, but with the absence of order. Bandits roam unchecked. Taxes are levied twice, once by the official, and again by whoever controls the road. Crops wither not from drought, but from abandonment. Local nobles flee. Some join rebel armies, some are killed by them. Villagers speak in whispers about the Yellow Turbans, a peasant movement turned army, led by mystics who claim to heal with incense and scriptural chants. They wear yellow cloth tied around their heads. When they arrive in your village, there are only two options: join or vanish. The fall of a dynasty rarely came cleanly. The Han fell not to one conqueror, but to fragmentation. The empire shattered into competing kingdoms way. Shu, Wu each claiming legitimacy, each drenched in the blood of civil war. The Sui dynasty collapsed under the weight of its own ambition, building grand canals and palaces as the people starved. The Tangjolden in poetry and art eventually broke under internal rebellions, eunuch intrigues, and warlordism. Even the mighty Song, renowned for science and sophistication, felt a foreign conquest. The Mongols came from the steppes not as raiders, but as rulers. The Yuan dynasty, established by Kublai Khan, was foreign in language, dress, and custom. Han Chinese were treated as second-class citizens in their own land. And though the Mongols adopted Chinese administration, the resentment simmered. The Red Turban rebels finally overthrew them. The Ming dynasty was born not only as a restoration of Han rule, but as a reaction to foreign domination. They rebuilt the Great Wall. They reasserted Confucian norms. But even they, with their splendid cities and porcelain palaces, could not escape decay. In the end, it's the Qing dynasty Manchu, not Han, would be the last. At first, they ruled with efficiency and vision. The Kanchi emperor stabilized the realm. The Conalong emperor expanded its borders. But beneath the surface, cracks formed. The population exploded, but food production did not. Corruption ran rampant. The imperial court, once filled with rigorous scholars, grew decadent and out of touch, and then West arrived. The Opium Wars marked the beginning of China's century of humiliation. British ships sailed up Chinese rivers demanding trade, territory, and compliance. The Qing emperors, isolated and insulated, were unprepared. They signed treaties that ceded ports, land, and pride. Hong Kong was lost. Tariffs were forced. Missionaries came, and so did soldiers. And in the countryside, secret societies like the Taiping, a strange blend of Christianity and Chinese mysticism, rose in rebellion, leaving tens of millions dead in one of the bloodiest civil wars in history. The Boxer Rebellion, fueled by spiritual possession and anti-foreign fury, was crushed by an 8-nation alliance. And by the time the last child emperor Pua ascended the throne in 1908, the dynasty was already a ghost. In 1912, the Qing officially fell. The imperial system, which had lasted for over 2 millennia, dissolved in a matter of days. But what did that fall feel like to the people? For a peasant in a village in Shanxi, it meant little changed. Taxes still came. Bandits still lurked. Officials still demanded bribes. The name of the dynasty had changed, but the hardships had not. For a scholar in Nanjing, it was a crisis of identity. The Confucian, exams, lifeblood, of merit and meaning were gone. His knowledge of ancient classics had no use in the Republic. For a noblewoman in Beijing, the fall meant exile, perhaps death. Her silks were now a target. Her name a curse, yet even in collapse, memory endures. Temples to forgotten emperors still stood. Ancestral halls still carried the names of those who served the dynasty. The imperial calendar lingered in local traditions. Lunar festivals, dragon dances, funeral rites, these carried whispers of the old world. And deep down, in stories told to grandchildren by lamplight, the emperors became myth. The cruelty was softened, the grandeur emphasized. The dynasties became symbols not of what was, but of what was lost. And as you rest now, consider the echoes, the quiet ruin of an abandoned palace. The stone steps worn smooth by generations of bowed heads, the imperial edicts, once thunderous, now crumbling scrolls locked in dusty cabinets. Time erases much, but not everything. The dynasties of China left behind more than just ruins. They left a rhythm, a cadence of rise and fall, a memory that refuses to fade. So close your eyes. The story is over, but the silence that follows is not empty. It is full of all that was left unsaid. Let the shadows of empires lull you into sleep. Let the weight of memory, gentle and steady, carry you through. The night